Hi everyone, it's Paul, Racing Vincent's 2021. It's been quite a few months since I did a last video. Frankly, I just haven't had the time to do it. Most of the time I've been spent manufacturing stuff and I don't seem to get round to it, so apologies if anybody was expecting another video. I will move back onto the bike I last did a video on, which was a 39 Manx. And although I haven't made any major progress, I've done a lot of smaller parts, and actually quite a few parts which will be manufactured or are already on the catalogue, which I used that chassis just to test things up against. So we'll be going on to that in earnest in hopefully a few months' time, a couple of months' time. But for the moment, I thought I might do just a quick update on where we are with, well, my current project, and actually one of my favourite projects, which is the bike you see behind me, which is a Douglas 2 3/4. Try and just do the odd hour or two here and there at weekends, and it's been very enjoyable. I started it back in 2016. It was a real basket case I bought from a Bonham's auction, and I think it was probably a collector of Douglas's and maybe other bikes which had died, because there was a large collection of veteran bikes. Really interesting stuff. I didn't go there with the intention of buying this. I went there with the intention of buying a Vincent rear frame member for a third Vincent project I've got. But I've always loved Douglas flat tankers. Many years ago, when I did a bit of sprinting, Douglas's, some of the flat twin Douglas for the DT5s or the SW5s, amazing things, and I've always had a soft spot for them. So when I saw a collection of Douglas's, and at that time I could tell they were very old Douglas's, certainly going into the teens. I didn't know very much about the models. I subsequently found out that at the auction there was two types, the 2 3/4 type, which this one is, and this one, the 2 3/4 model, was one of the most popular models pre-1920. Certainly pre-First World War, it was very popular, and I think it was the most heavily manufactured bike for the British Army in the First World War, and there's a couple of little bits reminiscent of that on this bike, which I'll probably cover later. But although the bike was missing lots and lots of parts and didn't look anything like this, it was basically just a chest of parts, the one that I actually purchased looked a really nice one. It had some very nice features, and have never regretted buying it. It's been a long kind of put together, as so much of it was missing, but really interesting and beautiful. Some of the parts beautifully made even back then, but also just that feeling of age. I'll probably do a couple more articles where I show some of the little trinkets, things like little grease nipples, original grease nipples. Fantastic. So I'm aware that since that time I've slowly been restoring it, and actually in some cases having to re-engineer some of the parts missing. But I saved a lot of photographs, and I've been meaning to do web page articles like I've done in the past, and just don't seem to get around to doing them. So what I may do is do a couple of YouTube videos where I put the photographs from where it started to where it is now, put those photographs into the YouTube video and put a bit of narrative over the top of it. But here we are this afternoon. It's probably 90% finished now, although it may not look it. So I'll probably do a few little bits on it, walking around it over the next week or two. For the moment, Saturday afternoon, and a cup of coffee, my broken mug, which I broke again. I dropped again last week, so it's got cracks in it at the moment. I'd rather be on my motorbike. I think on a day like today, because it's pretty cold, it's pretty murky out there and just getting dark now. I've got the radio on in the background, a cup of coffee in my hand. I think actually I'd rather be working on my motorbike than actually out on one today. So the job for this afternoon, and I'll probably show you it in a couple of minutes, is I'm working on the cables at the moment, and I'm fortunate to have a small selection of original cables I've been holding back or building over the last 20 or 30 years. So normally I try and put some nice cables on, and obviously for this bike what I am trying to do, like these ones here, is use original, if I've got it, new old stock, and luckily I've got a few new old stock very lightweight cloth covered cables. I've already done the carb. The front brake has had a little bit of my Terry's competition cable, probably actually from the 1930s. They may have been using those in the 20s, but they are lovely cables. They've got red flecks through them. Very hard to find now. Very rarely you'll ever see them, but that's just a small length of original Terry's competition cable. For this afternoon it's the exhaust valve lifter, and I've already done a bit of work on that. I'll probably show a couple of photographs, but I'm hoping to get it finished off this weekend, and possibly then the last cable I need to do is the magneto cable. So I'll be looking at that later as well. Okay. For the moment, Saturday afternoon, and a cup of coffee. My broken mug, which I broke again, I dropped again last week, so it's got cracks in it at the moment. I'd rather be on my motorbike. I think on a day like today, because it's pretty cold, it's pretty murky out there and just getting dark now. I've got the radio on in the background, a cup of coffee in my hand. I think actually I'd rather be working on my motorbike than actually out on one today. The job for this afternoon, and I'll probably show you it in a couple of minutes, is I'm working on the cables at the moment, and I'm fortunate to have a small selection of original cables I've been holding back or building over the last 20 or 30 years. So normally I try and put some nice cables on, and obviously for this bike what I am trying to do, like these ones here, is use original, if I've got it, new old stock, and luckily I've got a few new old stock very lightweight cloth covered cables. I've already done the carb. The front brake has had a little bit of my Terry's competition cable, probably actually from the 1930s. They may have been using those in the 20s, but they are lovely cables. They've got red flecks through them. Very hard to find now. Very rarely you'll ever see them, but that's just a small length of original Terry's competition cable. For this afternoon it's the exhaust valve lifter, and I've already done a bit of work on that. I'll probably show a couple of photographs, but I'm hoping to get it finished off this weekend, and possibly then the last cable I need to do is the magneto cable. So here's the engine unit, the 2 3/4, and the engine was rebuilt about 2 years ago. I say rebuilt because frankly one of the things I liked about this particular basket case, there was probably about 4 basket cases all lined up one after the other, and in my opinion this was by far the best of the lot. And the engine looked quite nice. Like quite a few of the parts that came with this, they either look like they've been hidden away for many years, and I think the previous owner had probably been collecting parts for 2 3/4 models for many years. But this one looks like certain parts of it including the crank and crankcases, may already have been, if not rebuilt, certainly cleaned up and very unmolested. And that's one of the things I liked about this particular engine. The model, the 2 3/4 model, was evolved from, I think it was first introduced in about 1908, 1909, but it looked much smaller in its very first guise. I think originally it was actually designed and called a fairy, but by about 1910-11, the main layout of a motor, as you're seeing around here, was pretty much settled. I think up until about 1912, 1913, this crankcase was slightly different in that it was recessed slightly at the top here. I don't profess to be the best of experts. It's not a model I'd previously owned until 4 or 5 years ago, but I have talked to quite a few people, and I think they changed to this design, which is pretty much a flush timing cover, in I think 1913-14, and the engine carried through in one guise or another until about, I think, 24-25. This one is pretty much the spec of just pre-war to just post First World War. The main difference with this one, well, let me tell you, the engine and frame number actually show it as being 1920. The cover for the timing case is actually 1919. Just bear with me a second, I'll just turn this off and go and get that. So, I'm hoping the camera focuses on this. You can see here, this is the timing cover for this bike, and you'll see it has WD 1919. I don't think the WD stands for War Department. The different models went through letters of the alphabet roughly through the years. So Model A, Model B, Model C. I think the Model A was about 1909, 1910. And they got to the Model V around, I think, about 1915, 1916. They were all pretty much, if they were a 350 2 3/4 model, they were all pretty much the same broad basic design, which was a 350 side valve engine with an outside flywheel at the back, which you can see poking through. I will get the bike out when the weather's a bit better one day, and I'll walk around the bike and probably do a few more articles on it, but just for the afternoon. This here, you can see the engine is a horizontally opposed a twin engine, 350cc, gear driven, and a lovely timing case with gears, central crankshaft, a gear below for the cam, and I don't know if you can see, but in here are long solid cam followers, and those cam followers act against push rods with adjusters here, springs, side valves, and on the earliest models, the 2 3/4 model, you can see that the barrel and the head are one component. And you can actually, I'm not quite sure what years they came in, but you can see that the earlier models had less finning around this area than than this, and you see a lot of these barrels with fins missing. I've actually lightly restored these. Both barrels were actually in very good condition, and I had a set of original pistons which were the right bore for these barrels, very fortunately. What I didn't have was the piston rings, and I had to have those made specially. I'll probably cover that in another article. But the barrels themselves were very good condition. I just lightly recut the seats, fitted new valve guides which came from the Douglas Club. The springs I've now had manufactured, little cups that hold the springs, I now manufacture. And by the way, there is a Douglas section on the website. I didn't do this as an advert, but a number of these early parts obviously are very hard to get parts for now, so I have actually started a Douglas 2 3/4 section on the website, and a lot of the parts, it's like these, I'll cover later on if I do something on the heads. But these spark plug, the valves access nuts, I now manufacture those as well. I have to say they look quite pretty now they've been done. They look very nice. But the crankcase, coming back to the engine design, as you can see, the crankcase was, I think, a very pretty design, and it was almost like a vertical crankcase. It's in two parts. It's split along the normal vertical line, and you can see the magneto was sat on top. In this case it's an EIC magneto, and that's a reasonably good way, I think, of identifying the year as being after about 1915, 1916. Prior to that time, I think the most common magneto to fit on it was a Bosch magneto, and certainly pre-war you'll see a number of pre-World War One. The magneto fitted on this model was Bosch, but obviously from the time of the First World War, the supply of Bosch magnetos tended to dry up a little bit due to the fact that they were made by the Germans. So EIC became the most common magneto. What else about it? I think one of the interesting features about this crankcase is there's no oil pump. It's a total loss lubrication system, and here you can see is a hand oil pump. And by the way, you're probably looking at the fuel tank. The fuel tank has had an awful lot of work on it to sympathetically restore it, but also to keep that beautiful patina of the original paintwork. So one of the things that attracted me when I saw the bike in the show in Bonham's auction was it had a petrol tank with its original paint job still on it. Now I have done a fair bit of work on that to sympathetically restore it, and it is lacquered to protect it now. But isn't that beautiful? Isn't it fantastic to see a tank that's still in its 100-year-old paint scheme, and it still has the original hand pump. Now again, that's been stripped, sympathetically worked on. It didn't need an awful lot of work, to be fair. I was very fortunate with it. It's even got the original fillers, and the rear filler is the fuel filler, notable because it's got a breather hole in the middle, and the front is the oil filler, and that doesn't have a hole in it. That kind of makes me think the two of them are original. And there you can see the sight feed of the oil drip, and the idea being you pumped by hand the oil tank, which is in this front section, and you then set this adjuster when you're running. Very similar if you're one of my Norton colleagues, and you happen to have a racing Inter or a Manx, you'll know that we do the drip feeds primary chain oilers, and actually I think they were made by the same people, and you can see here that it's got a similar drip feed, and that drip feed feeds under here. You can see the pump takes to the drip feed. Takes to the drip feed. I'm showing you, not really pointing the camera. So you can see that the pipes there, and I haven't had these plated yet, but again I've manufactured the pipes up from it to the original design. But you can see that the oil hand pump has a feed of oil in here, and there's actually like 3 small holes which allow oil to enter that chamber of the pump, and then it pumps into this area, into the drip feed. You set the drip feed that you want, and it comes down here through this valve and directly into the crankcases. And the crankcases, basically it's oil splash. It's the very earliest kind of oil feed, and it is total loss. There is a couple of drainage points, but it's simplicity itself. And I suppose providing you remember to fill the oil tank, you know that the engine's always receiving fresh oil, because reminds me of the old grass track bikes you used to have with Jap speedway engines in. You pretty much know that if you put oil in the oil tank, it's nice fresh oil, because it's always only going through once. And if you look at the bottom here, you can see there are bolts. The crankcase has casting lugs at the bottom part of the engine that clamp to the down tube, to the lower horizontal tube of the frame. Trying to show, I'm on a tripod at the moment, so it's a little bit difficult to get any lower than this. And that's one of the hallmarks of the earlier Douglas models, is they tended to have a single tube at the bottom running the length, quite high up actually. Gave them a very unusual look to them. And then they had the front down tube extended past that horizontal tube, with then another lug coming out. And on the touring models and a lot of the early models, they had footboards running from here to here, and a footboard. But going back to that kind of prefix for the different models, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, depending on what the prefix was, kind of determined whether it was in the kind of like a full touring trim with deeply valenced mudguards. You'll see here these are not. Deeply valenced mudguards, very upright handlebars, or the more sporting look. And although I don't believe they actually made a formal TT replica, you'll see references on the early models to TT spec, which certainly meant that the handlebars were of a sporting variety. I'll cover the detail of it another time, but actually these handlebars are based on the Works Racing model of 1912, and certainly I've taken a bit of artistic license here, because there are bits of a bike which probably wouldn't have been fitted when the bike was new. You'll see that I've got a damper. I've had this damper sat here for 30 years. It's a very early Andre, and it was just too nice. I'm not and its mounts were the original flat tank mount type, and it was just too good. I don't know if I'll ever own another flat tank of kind of mid 20s look. It was too nice not to put on. And actually, the works type handlebars, and when I say works, I mean the 1911, 1912 racing bikes. If you look at the few photographs that exist of them, they look to have had their handlebars mounted under the top crown, as opposed to most 2 3/4 handlebars, which were through the centre. And I've actually got a set of what I believe are original TT type bars. I'll show that on another day. Another time warp little piece, and I've got most of another bike, and they might get fitted to them one day. So when I started doing this, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do it, and I know a lot of the restoration was earlier. So what I'll do is break in and show some photographs and put some narrative over the top. So as I've just said there, here's the original kind of style handlebars with the stem. You'll see it's got nickel plating at the bottom. They are quite nice, but they are also quite heavily corroded. But that's the standard kind of style handlebars. I say standard, the normal fork stem, as you can see, where it would go into the top of the fork stem. And what I will do is show some photographs in a minute of the type underneath, the TT type, which I made. So you can see there, look very nice and original and time warp, and I certainly would like to fit those to another bike. So going back to the original restoration in 2016, I quickly decided I wanted to kind of emulate the TT bike. So a few pictures follow from that period, 1912, of the TT bikes. Harry Bashell, see the bike there, you can just see the handlebars, and Les Bailey, similarly, downturned handlebars. And what follows is a picture of Harry Bashell actually going over the finishing line at the 1912 TT. So that's the actual bike that won the Junior TT. And afterwards it had to be stripped. So there's a picture here which gives a very good view of the handlebars on the left as it was being stripped to have its CC measured. So that's actually after the 1912 Junior TT. And you can see there the handlebars in the middle are just under that top link of the crown and look to have some form of casting holding them. So with no chance of getting any of those, I decided to have a go at making a set. So first thing, block of steel, square block in a forge yaw, and started to machine it. You see, the first thing here is to bore the hole for the actual handlebars, and 1-inch handlebars. I'm just removing the outer edges here on my old Smart and Brown lathe. You can see that that point it's been done for the handlebar hole, and here you can see there's 2 cross holes which will eventually be the clamp. And after a lot of machining down and removing a lot of metal, that's the interim kind of, yeah, the clamp on here back to the part that bolts onto the head stem. You can see that I've now bored a half circle and the head stem clamp so that it'll fit around that head stem. And at the back of it here, I'm just machining away using a bullnose mill to remove metal. You can see it's starting to take shape here, a different profile. And then when it was finished, that block, I kind of cleaned it up a little bit, and it was actually quite slim where it brazes around the handlebar. That point was not as much metal, so it's a lot lighter now. Took a lot of machining. You can see here how it started on the left and how it finished. I was quite pleased how it came out, and it's just at the right kind of dimensions that allow it to clamp behind that main head stem. So the next step after that was to then look at a profile of bar I wanted. So I've got a length of 1-inch handlebar tube that I keep, and made up a rough profile from the photographs. You can see it here. Don't worry about the kinks in it, because I was going to give it to people who make handlebars for me. So obviously I wanted to try and get it close to those original racing shapes, and I was quite pleased. Once I'd done that, I then gave that profile to the handlebar makers, and they made me a setup, and that's the finished job back in 2016, having brazed it in the right position to the lug, and it fitted at this stage. And this is how I took it to Brooklands in 2016, just roughly assembled, and it looked just like a barn find. And you'll notice at that point there's no controls fitted, but I'd wrapped medical cloth tape around and put some oil on it, on the oily mitts. Gave it the look of the old kind of speedway style bikes with that medical tape on, so it looked quite nice. And it got a lot of attention on the day. It was nice. This is early in the morning, so there's only a few people around, but as you can see, there's already somebody having a read. I put some information about it underneath. And it was nice. I was quite pleasantly surprised the amount of attention it got on the day, as it just looked like it had been pulled out of a shed from round the corner. And I took the Norton, which is behind it at the time, and you can see later on in the day all the bikes lined up, and it was a pleasant day. And that's pretty much the point I got to for that period in time, 2016. I moved on to other work and didn't really come back to it until 2017. And at that point, bike was kind of semi-built up, but needed stripping down to do the work proper on it. So as far as the handlebar is concerned, in the interim time, I'd managed to pick up a rather nice Bowden twin throttle air lever that shows here, and a corresponding magneto lever for the opposite side. So I've now wanted to make fixings for them. So as you can see here with the handlebars, what I decided to do was to braze small diamonds, which I've seen done on original style handlebars, look quite nice, which strengthens the handlebars so they could be drilled to take a central mounting for those levers. So you can see there the wooden brazed, but the handlebars and the whole bike, as you can see, still with a fair bit of rust on it. And at this point I was almost ready to strip it down and send all the parts away for nickel plating. Now I also had a set of Burt Pole original Douglas levers which were brazed on at that point. So moving forwards, last couple of shots, moving forwards to as it was a few weeks ago actually. So this is February 2021. Bike's now been restored, and the handlebars are nickel plated about 18 months ago. And you can see here, handlebars, John Bull, very long grips on it. Hopefully they look quite the part. Nice TT style profile, gives it that look of that old racing bike. So that's about it for this short video. I didn't finish doing the part on the cables. I'll do that on the next clip. So hopefully do another clip similar to this shortly, and I'll probably pick up a little bit of film and then intersperse that with some photographs from earlier parts of the restoration. Thanks for watching. Bye.